Hello, everyone. It is Sunday, December 11th. Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Good evening. I'm Stephanie Guadian. A startling new study shows underage drinking is a big problem in El Paso. And now El Paso City Council is taking aim at those who provide a location for the underage drinking to take place. Representatives just passed the so-called social host ordinance. According to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, a social host ordinance gives communities a practical tool for holding adults furnishing alcohol to youth under 21 accountable. When police arrive at a party where underage drinking is taking place, it really can be difficult to determine exactly who is responsible. But with social host liability, the focus is on where the drinking is taking place, in addition to those who provided the alcohol. We want to hear from you tonight. Remember, you can email us your comments and your questions right now to ABC-7 Extra at KVIA.com. You can also call 915-496-1771, and you can tweet me at sguadian ABC7 and just use the hashtag ABC7 Extra so we know how to find you. Joining us now is my guest tonight, including El Paso Representative Dr. Michael No, Daniela Marquez, and Holly Mata. They are with the YMCA and the Alcohol Impact Network. Thank you all very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Tonight. Dr. No, I want to start with you because it was just this past week that the City Council passed the so-called social host ordinance.
Right.
Why is it called that, first of all?
Well, social because it has to do with parties. Okay? And if you're hosting that party, then that's something that we're concerned about. Now, the main thing that I would like the public to know is that this is much more of an educational tool I think the city is wanting to use instead of something to try to crack down on people who are doing this. What we're trying to do is give our law enforcement a better opportunity to enforce the laws that we have. We have a law right now that says you can't serve alcohol to minors. But it's really hard to prove that somebody served alcohol to a minor. If they say they had no idea that it was going on, even though it was in their home, something like that. You know, in a criminal sort of situation, you have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that's very difficult to do. With a social host ordinance, you know, if a person should have known that it was going on in their house, they were in the house when it was happening, then it's a much easier sort of situation that our law enforcement has to go ahead and show that the owner of the property should be held responsible. Now, holding that person responsible doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fine him or send him to jail or anything.
This is a civil ordinance.
It's a civil ordinance, and there's plenty of things that we can do, including education or fines, to try to stop people who are regularly doing this or even occasionally doing this from continuing it. Try to show them the harm that they're causing, and that's where the education comes in.
Holly, I know this is really a baby of yours. You originally brought this forth. Why is it so important to sort of target adults who are responsible for this?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us on tonight. This is such a great day for El Paso. Last week, first city in Texas to adopt the Civil Social Host Ordinance. And just to clarify, I was the spokesperson at the City Council meeting back in April that brought this forward when Dr. No agreed to be our champion on City Council, but I was there representing a really large group, the Alcohol Impact Network, and which is comprised of many people throughout the community and organizations who are really interested in this issue. So this was a community initiative, and there are many faces behind the initiative, and Dr. No took this to City Council, and unanimously back in April, the City Council said, yes, we have a big problem with underage drinking parties, and we know that there's something we can do about it, and here we are 6 months later, and thanks to the hard work of the police department, the public health department, the city attorney's staff, and many community members who've been advocating for this issue, El Paso now has a really strong ordinance that can serve as a model for other communities.
So let's break it down and just explain to the folks out there watching, when would something like this apply? Basically, it's if I'm an adult and there is a party going on at my house where underage drinking is taking place, I am also going to be held responsible.
Right. We're an investigation at that point.
Right.
You know, so who supplied the liquor, who supplied the venue for the drinking
location
and everything. Did that person know about it, or should that person have known about it? Not necessarily will you, just because you're the owner of the home or something, be held responsible.
But there will be an investigation, and if I am the owner of the home and the police come to me and I say, oh, I had no idea that this was happening at my house, what happens then?
Well, now you do. You know your kid needs a little bit more supervision, and so they're going to ask that you, in the future, try to do things to curb that activity so that it doesn't continue to happen. And at that point, for that first time, that's it. You know, just let the person know what's going on. Give them a chance to be responsible.
Okay. Would it work the same way if, say, I own a building and I have apartments and there are tenants where this is taking place?
I believe so. It would be the same thing. You'd notify the management of the apartments that you've got something going on in there, and I'm certain that the management would then let the tenant know that they're breaking the law and therefore breaking the rules, I'm sure, in their contract.
Okay. And so the first communication is a warning, just letting people know. What happens, though, again, if it continues to happen at the same place?
Well, so the way the ordinance is written is, and you asked about a typical scenario. So think about, I mean, this is not about a couple kids drinking quietly in the basement. This is about those large underage drinking parties that result in people calling the police. And they're really designed to reduce the kinds of parties that result in the kinds of consequences that nobody wants for their kid or for their community. The sexual assaults, the DWIs. We know that they happen, and we know that, that kids and families really suffer as a result. So this really is just an extra tool for law enforcement. If an underage drinking party happens at your home, and often when the police are able to respond, you know, kids scatter, a few of them may get held accountable, and then the police are going to do whatever they do on the criminal side. That doesn't change. But this is just another tool for them, so that if you're that parent sitting in the house with your headphones on while 100 people are partying in your backyard, you knew or you should have known that that was happening. And if you're there on a first offense, you will likely get cited. If you're not home when the party happens, they can still cite the responsible adult or whoever the host was of the party. Let's say you were out of town, or let's say you were at a movie, you'd get notified. And most parents are really happy about that, because if these parties are happening at their homes, they want to find out about it. There is, the city was very thoughtful and took into account feedback from the community and from city council members. And so if you are cited under the ordinance, you do have the option to request being able to take an approved education class or participate in community service in lieu of paying the fine. And so they were very deliberate and thoughtful in how they spelled it out. And from the communities that have these, what they're really designed to do is just prevent these parties from happening in the first place. People start to hear about it and say, oh no, not at my house. Just like we have speed limits. It's kind of like a speed limit for parties. If your party gets so loud and out of control that people are calling the police about it, you should be held accountable. And I think this is a really fair way to do that, and people are really excited about it.
And Daniela, if I could pose a question to you, we put this up on our Facebook and asked people to comment. A couple of the comments, if I can sort of play devil's advocate, they said, you know, this is sort of underage drinking is just sort of a rite of passage. Why is the city getting involved in this?
Well, as you know, we did the underage drinking report, and we have data that backups what we're doing. And we know that most youth that drinks at house parties. And we also went and talked to youth, to the community, and this is something that is happening in our community. We got posts actually from Facebook that say, oh, there's another party in my house tonight, $3 in the entrance, girls are free. So we know this is something that is happening in our community, and we are really happy that our community is doing something about it.
And you said something interesting to me right before the show, is that the parties that are happening now with the underage kids are not the parties that their parents had when they were young, thanks to the invention of Facebook and the internet, right? Suddenly the party where 30 people are invited could turn into 300.
Yes, exactly, and that's the problem that we're facing now. A party that before used to be maybe 10 people, 20 people, now is turning into 50, 100 people, 200 people going into the party, and sometimes people that you not even know, people that you didn't invite are coming to those parties. And that's why we're trying to reduce those high-risk settings where sexual assaults, intoxication, fights can happen.
Drunk driving.
Yeah.
Too. Why was this so important for you to take on?
Well, for exactly that. I mean, it's not. It is, in a lot of people's opinion, a rite of passage that you know children will go through in this. But there's so much peer pressure, and the consequences can be so catastrophic. You know, a fight's one thing, but a homicide is another. And alcohol is involved in homicides like this, and suicides, and in fatal traffic accidents. And everybody watching this knows that they don't have to look too far back in the past to remember a news story about some poor child who died needlessly in a car accident or something like that, and alcohol was involved. And so it is something that at the end of the day, when we took the vote and we won, I told council, I remember saying that they'll never, fortunately, never know the names, but they just saved a lot of kids' lives. And I think they really did. They saved a lot of trouble for some other kids in just getting in trouble or you know, getting the DUI or the traffic accident, and you know, getting in trouble with their folks for wrecking the car and stuff. But you know, you can't bring a kid back from death, and that's what I'm really trying to do, is just to try to curb that.
What kind of pushback, or did you get any when you first brought this up? Because I remember it first being mentioned at City Council back in April.
Right. I wouldn't call it pushback. This thing is new for Texas. El Paso is no stranger to doing things new in Texas. And so our city, rightfully so, wanted to be very careful about how everything was worded, wanted to go out and vet with the community, wanted to make sure that we did this right. And so it took months to get this back to council in a form that we could consider. And there were a couple of different forms that we were considering. And luckily, in my opinion, we went ahead and passed the one that I think will be most effective.
Okay. Holly, we talked about first-time offenders getting a warning. What happens if it keeps happening? Again, this is a civil ordinance, not criminal, but there are going to be fines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So sure. So of course, law enforcement always has discretion with these ordinances. On the first offense, if the host is there, they are liable to be cited. So it's only if the person is, you know, if the parent is not present, that they would get that notice as opposed to getting cited. So the first offense, the civil penalty, and we always call it fines, but with civil ordinances, technically it's a civil penalty, not a fine. But the amount is $250. On a second offense, it could be up to $500, and on a third offense, it could be up to $1,000. However, and this again was based on input from community members, from council members, and from law enforcement, people have the option to request to be able to take an approved education class that's been approved by the Department of Public Health, or to perform community service. And there's a 6-month, I believe the ordinance takes effect 180 days from the date of passage. And so that really gives the community, and you know, that's a way that we can support our police department up front, is the fewer of these parties that happen, the less work it is for them on the backside in terms of either enforcing the ordinance. I mean, that's just the minor part. The major part is if you can shut down some of these parties before they get out of control, then there's not so much happening at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning. And the communities that have adopted these across the country, and there's several hundred that have had these ordinances going back about a decade now, are really seeing success in terms of reducing the number of large underage drinking parties. The Surgeon General's new report, first report ever from the Surgeon General on alcohol, called Facing Addiction, Surgeon General's report on alcohol and other drugs, was just released a week before the City Council meeting. And they recommend civil social host ordinances as a community level prevention strategy. So it was perfect timing. But again, these ordinances are really designed not to make more work for law enforcement, but in communities where the community pitches in and does their job getting the work out, they really do prevent some of the work at the tail end.
Okay, and Daniela and Holly, I know you're both very involved with a study that was just released, done on El Paso. Startling study, really, the results. I think we're going to talk about those in just a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break. Remember, you're watching ABC-7 Extra. We want to hear from you tonight. You can call our comment line, 915-496-1771, and if you're online right now, you can email us, ABC7extra at KVIA.com, and you can also tweet me at Guadian ABC7. Just use the hashtag ABC7 Extra. You're watching ABC7 Extra, where news comes first.
that are alcohol related, and what are evidence-based strategies that they can use to help reduce the risk that communities face. And so we helped to gather the data. Our large community network chipped in, and whether it was police department data, public health department data, he helped compile it all. And what we really wanted to do was just be able to say to El Paso, this is the extent of our problem. And these are some solutions that have been proven to work in reducing the risk that young people face. We wanted it to be something that we could talk about, that we could share, and that would serve as a baseline to say, hey, here's where we are right now. We're getting ready we just adopted this civil social host ordinance, and hopefully that will help with some of the large underage drinking parties, which pose the most risk to our kids. But we kind of wanted to just give a snapshot of this is what alcohol problems look like in our community. We haven't talked about the economic cost yet. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that the cost of underage drinking to Texas is $1.8 billion every year. If you allocate that based on population to the city of El Paso, that equates to $48 million a year, every year, that the city bears as the economic cost of underage drinking. That includes traffic crashes, healthcare costs, criminal justice costs, and lost workplace productivity. So, it's a big economic burden. Most of all, it's just a tremendous burden on families that are the ones that get that phone call in the middle of the night. And that's, hopefully, that's what this report is going to do, is help people realize the extent of the problem, as well as that there are solutions that communities can do. It's not just a parent problem. It's not just a kid problem. It's a community problem.
Daniela, did you find out any information about who these adults are who might be providing a place for underage kids to drink? Is it some, relatives? Is it parents? Is it strangers?
Actually, when we were first working on this and we had those numbers that most kids who drink at house parties, we wanted to know what the environment looked like in El Paso for house parties, and we went and interviewed community members, interviewed youth, and one of the questions that we did is asking, do you think parents know about house parties? And a lot of the questions that we got is that, yes, parents know, oh yes, parents know, oh yes, parents know. So a lot of the times our parents, that sometimes they do it for a good reason. They think, oh, if I let my kids drink at home, that will be better, because that way they don't have to drive and things like that. But we also found that most parents do not want other parents making that decision that their kids can drink. So yes, you can allow your child to drink, but you cannot make that decision for the other parents.
Right, because there's going to be a lot of other kids there, and while that one child may be able to drink and then just go upstairs to his or her room and have a safe night, what about the other kids at that party? How are they getting home?
And it's really hard to control 50 kids who are drinking. I mean, it's just
other times parents rent, they think, oh, my kid's done such a good job in school and they're graduating, and so we're going to rent a motel room for them or rent a party hall. And under the new ordinance, if you are that adult who rents a place where an underage drinking party happens, you can be cited for that too. So, so this just helps put people on notice. It's not a good idea. It's not safe for you, your child, or the community, and the community doesn't want it to happen anymore. So.
Okay, so we've been asking people to call into the show, and we do have our first caller tonight. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, Stephanie. Roy Aldrich. I'm a former POW from the Korean War. I was refused to drink when I was 19 years old, even though I'd just been repatriated from a POW camp. I think this ordinance that they've passed is sort of ridiculous, as anybody who, in my situation of 18 and above, who joined the military, we're denied a drink at any of the bars. And that we should be able to, if we can defend our country, we should be able to have a social drink, even if it's at my house. Thank you. Goodbye.
All right, well, thank you very much for that call. Dr. No, I'll let you take that.
And I'll tell you that I grew up in the same generation. When I was a senior in high school at 18, we were allowed to drink, and we did. I can remember very well at lunch, we would go to Mr. Gaddy's and have a pitcher of beer, and I'd go back for sixth period after drinking at lunch. So If the gentleman on the line believes that the law is incorrect and making it 21, then he should advocate for changing the law. Right now, the public, however, believes that 21 is a reasonable age that young people are mature enough to understand the consequences of drinking too much, and having a designated driver, etc. So, I respect his opinion, and I really want to make sure that people don't think that I'm trying to tell them how to be parents. We're not trying to tell you what to do with your child. We're trying to make sure that you understand that it's not just your child in there. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to provide alcohol, I believe, in Texas or in many other states to your own child under certain situations. It's the parents who don't want you serving their kids liquor when they don't even know about it in your home. That's what we're trying to get people to understand. These people that are throwing these big parties just serving liquor to anybody that walks in there and pays the $3 at the door, which is again illegal. You're now selling alcohol without a license.
So that's a whole nother layer.
This whole thing, can snowball into something that's incredibly tragic. And to think that that's ridiculous, I respect his opinion. I disagree with him.
And I should mention, again, we posted the story on our Facebook page, and there have been people who support it. One person wrote in, yes, another one said, about time. Have you had a lot of negative feedback on this, or has it been mostly positive?
For the most part, I would say it's been extremely positive. We've heard from young people, we've heard from parents, we've heard from high school students, we've heard from people who've gotten that phone call to say your child's in a coma in the ER because of alcohol poisoning. And in fact, one of them spoke at City Council. And so we've heard both from parents who've been through these tragedies, and we've also heard from parents who just like the fact that El Paso is taking a step to make Friday and Saturday nights a little bit safer for the community. If there's fewer parties, everybody's kid is safer on a Friday night. And that's what this is about. And for the caller, sir, I want to say thank you for your service. The drinking age of 21, I think, is always a difficult thing for a service member who's 18 or 19 or 20, and that it got raised to 21 in this country just because of the science behind it. We know if you raise the drinking age to 21, you save lives, and so although for individuals it can seem unfair, when you look at society as a whole, it saves lives.
And that is the law now. We have another caller that we want to go ahead and listen to. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Jesus from the West Side, and I was talking about underage drinking. And I'm wondering, what the panel thinks about school district administrators not doing anything to prevent underage drinking that goes on in the public schools.
Welcome back, everyone. We want to get to that study that we've been talking about. You sort of had some startling results, at least I think they're startling, when we're talking about underage kids and drinking.
So some of the data that is in the report does just reinforce some of how serious some of the consequences can be. And nationwide, we know that among young people, 47% of homicides and 23% of suicides are directly attributable to alcohol. And so, we often talk a lot about it's just a rite of passage, or it's just something kids go through. But, and for many people, that is true. They go through it and they come out the other side. But others don't, and these parties are just the riskiest type of underage drinking, which is why the ordinances are really targeted towards the large underage drinking parties. And anything the community can do to prevent those parties from happening, whether it's 1 life, 2 life, 5 lives, everybody is going to be able to look back and say, we really took a step and said, we're taking a stand. We're just not okay with this. And so I think El Paso should be really proud for that. And again, I just want to give a big shout out to all of the community groups that worked on this initiative, and especially to our law enforcement and city staff who worked so hard to make this happen. A lot of community outreach is going to happen between now and the implementation of the ordinance. Daniela, do you want to talk about?
Yes, under our Alcohol Impact Network, we have a lot of communities, a lot of community organizations that are that have been working on this, and they are really happy to do community outreach and provide the city with all the support that we can, so that we can let people know what is happening, and hopefully nobody will want to be a host.
Michael, no,
We do have some time to get that information out to the city
Yes.
before this law takes effect.
and I really think if we could end on just, if you could just explain again how this really isn't designed how to tell people how to be parents.
Right. We're not telling people how to raise their children. We're asking people not to do things with other people's children that's illegal, and promoting things that can be catastrophic in their lives. Car wrecks, DUIs, the sexual assaults. When you become intoxicated, things can get out of hand. We all know that. Adults know that. And nobody wants to see a child's life end so early. So what the city is trying to do really is just try to give our law enforcement a better opportunity to curb that activity, and bring the people in that are offering their homes and other places up for venues for this sort of stuff, and even providing the alcohol for it, to provide education to that, so that they know exactly what they're getting into, and how it can harm them.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for being with us tonight. Really appreciate it, and I hope that we've given you some food for thought. You've been watching ABC 7 Extra. Have a great night and a great week ahead. Bye-bye.